On this night, we gather to remember, and we open our hearts and our minds to relive the pain, but also the victory, which has become for us the doorway to the eternal. We recognize this night the shadows which encroach on every life, and meditate on that one moment in history when the shadows seem to extinguish the light entirely. We come in awe and in worship. For the darkness has never, and will never, ever overcome the light revealed in the human life and the death of Jesus the Christ. Let us pray. Christ our brother, Christ our friend, before you die and the world goes into deep darkness, take from our lives all that has hurt you, all that has hurt others, and the intransigence which has made us numb to the plight of those we could help or heal. May your life bring us freedom to follow your way. May the taste of the kingdom you gave us be enough to sustain us until we see it again here with you. Love and life cannot be overcome. And we will be your witnesses. Make us ever more faithful. Amen.
Our
Listen again while I recount the story of that fateful night of betrayal, of Christ's arrest and torture and crucifixion. They went first to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And he took with him Peter and James and John, and he began to be distressed and agitated, and he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here with me and keep awake." And going a little further, he threw himself on the ground and he prayed, if it were possible, that the hour might pass. "Father, Abba, for you all things are possible. Remove this cup from me, yet not what I want, but what you want. Your will be done." And he came back to his friends, and he found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep? Could you not stay awake even for an hour? Keep awake, pray with me. Pray that you may not come to a time of trial, for your spirit is indeed willing, but your flesh is weak." And he went off again to pray on his own. And he said the same words in his prayer to his Father. But once more again he came back, and he found them sleeping, for their eyes were so heavy. They didn't know what to say to him. He came a third time. "Are you still sleeping?" he said, "taking your rest? Enough! Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is to be betrayed into the hands of the sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." While he was saying these words, suddenly a crowd came, and the one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. And he approached Jesus and he kissed him. And Jesus said, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you will betray the Son of Man?" And when those who were around him saw that what was coming, they asked, "Lord, shall we strike out with our sword?" And one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this, no more." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus turned to the chief priests, the officers of the temple priests, and the elders who had come for him and said, "Have you come out with swords and clubs as if I were a bandit? I was with you day after day in the temple. You didn't lay hands on me. But this is your hour and the power of darkness." Then they seized him and they led him away, bringing him into the high priest's house. But Peter was following at a distance. And when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat amongst them. Then a servant girl, seeing him in the firelight, stared at him and said, that man was with him also." But Peter denied it. Woman, I do not know him." A little while later, someone else, seeing him, said, "You are one of them." Peter said, "I am not." About an hour later, yet another insisted, "Surely that man was with him, for he is a Galilean." And Peter said, "I do not know what you are talking about." And at that moment, while he was still speaking, the cock crowed. The Lord turned and looked across the courtyard at Peter. And Peter remembered the words that he had spoken when he said to him, "Before the cock crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter went and wept. Now, as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes of the whole council. They bound Jesus up. They led him away, and they handed him over to Pilate. Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Are you asking this on your own, or as some others tell you that?" "I'm not a Jew, am I?" said Pilate. "Your own nation and the chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus replied, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers, they would be fighting in the streets to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him again, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everything and everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." And Pilate asked, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went out again and he said to the crowds, "You have a custom that I release for you on Passover. Do you want me to release this man, the King of Jews?" But they shouted, "No, Barabbas, Barabbas." Barabbas was a murderer, a bandit. So Pilate ordered that Jesus should be taken and flogged. And the soldiers, they wove a crown of thorns and they put it on his head. And they dressed him in a purple robe, a mockery of king. And they kept coming up saying to him, "Hey, hail, King of the Jews." And they struck him on the face. And Pilate went out again and he said to the crowd, "Look, I am bringing him out to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said, "Here is the man." And when the chief priest and the police saw him, they shouted again, "Crucify him! Crucify him! We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die. He claimed to be the Son of God." So when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. And he entered his headquarters again, and he said to Jesus again, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him again, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have the power to release you or to crucify you?" Jesus replied, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you, they are guilty of the greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him. The Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you will be no friend of the emperor. For everyone who claims to be a king is setting himself up against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and he sat on the judge's bench, and he said to the crowd, "Here is your king." And they cried, "Crucify him, away with him, away with him." So Pilate asked them again, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." So they flogged Jesus again and handed him over to be crucified. The soldiers led him away to the courtyard of the palace, and they called together the whole cohort, all the troops, and mocking him in his purple cloak and having twisted thorns into a crown and crushed it upon his head, they again began to salute him and call him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they again struck him with a reed and spat upon him. And they knelt down in false homage before him. And after mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak. And they put his own clothes back on him. And they led him out to crucify him. They compelled a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry his cross. His name, Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. And then they took Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. And there they offered him mixed wine with myrrh, but he would not take it. And they crucified him. And they divided their clothes among them, and they cast lots to decide who should take what. 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And by his side they crucified two bandits, one to his right and the other to his left. And Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Those who passed by derided him, shaking their fists, shouting, "You saved others, but you cannot save yourself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross so that we will then see and believe." With this mockery, they insulted him. And then they turned and insulted the others too who were crucified. And when it was noon, darkness descended over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard this, they mistook it, but they said, "Listen, he's calling out for Elijah." And someone else ran and filled a sponge again with sour wine and put it on a stick and gave it to him drink. But others said, No, wait, let's see whether Elijah will come and take him down." But Jesus gave a loud breath, a cry, and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and a centurion who stood facing him saw that as he breathed his last, and looking at him said, "Truly, this man was God's son." Now there were also women there looking on from a distance, among them Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the younger, and of Joseph and Salome. They used to follow him and provide him with food and care and shelter when he was in Galilee. And there were many other women there who had come with him to Jerusalem. When evening had come, and since it was the day of preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was waiting himself expectantly for the kingdom of God, he went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate wondered if Jesus was already dead. He summoned the centurion who had been on guard, and he asked him, "Has he been dead for some time?" The centurion said he had. So Pilate granted the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought a linen cloth and took down the body and wrapped it in the cloth. And he laid it in a tomb, one that had been hewn out of rock. And then he rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. And Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, they noted and saw where the body was laid.
It's our job to keep the peace, to keep the people in line, to make sure everyone follows the rules of the empire, to ensure there's no funny business with money or politics or religion. We'd heard about this Jesus character and his little band of peasants and women, but he hadn't seemed like a threat before. Now it turns out he's been subverting our food system by feeding people and getting them to share. He's raised the dead and healed people who are sick without a license. And people are saying that he's the Son of God. Well, there's only one son of a god in Rome, and that's the emperor. We can't have someone else calling himself that, or letting people think he's better than the emperor. He's a usurper. Well, we know what to do with criminals and usurpers. As long as they aren't Roman citizens, we can torture them with the most brutal form of execution we could think of. We nail them on a cross and leave them. And everyone is so ashamed to be associated with them that the name of the executed is never spoken again. They're not mentioned, not remembered, not buried. They just disappear, erased, as if they never existed. It's the only way we've found to squash ideas, rebellion, and crime all at once. It's great for getting rid of our competition. And this guy, Jesus, is definitely competition. His idea of how the world works doesn't fit with our empire's vision, so he's gotta go.
I don't know when it happened, but things changed somehow. First, he was strong, confident, outspoken. I had such high hopes. Finally, a leader to throw off the Romans. But just when the time was right, at the height of his popularity, he withdrew. He became quiet, almost introspective. I thought a bit of a push would help him to reach for greatness, you know? Just pass on a bit of information about his movement, and make a little side money for me, then watch him rise to victory when they came for him. Only, it didn't work out like that. He let them take him. "You'll betray me, Judas," he'd said. I wonder how he knew. I thought I'd been discreet, but I never expected that I'd be playing along with the empire. I didn't expect it to turn out the way that it did.
He was such a unique boy, my nephew. Cousin to my sons, James and John, but more of a friend to them and to me. He was always caring, always serving, always putting others first. I remember when I asked him if my boys could sit on thrones with him in his kingdom. You know, one on his left and one on his right. "Salome," he said to me, "the great ones in God's kingdom are the ones who serve. Even I have come to serve, to live a God-filled life all the way to the end." I felt rather humbled that day. It's incredible that in his time of agony, praying all alone, the ones who served so well couldn't serve him in return. Not for one short hour. There they were, my sons and Peter, all asleep, while Jesus cried and prayed. And none of the others were any better. Alone. Alone he prayed, "Take this cup away from me, but Let not my will, but yours, Father, be done.
That was a dark night. We didn't expect those terrible things. Perhaps we should have foreseen it, prepared for it. Maybe then we would have reacted differently and stood with him through it all. But we didn't understand. So there we were, Peter, James, and me, fast asleep, oblivious to his tears. And suddenly he's waking us up, and there's Judas with lights and swords and soldiers arresting Jesus. We were no match for them, and they would have taken us too. We were terrified, and so we ran away, all of us, and left him to face their swords alone.
What was I thinking? I expected so much more from myself. Oh, at the table it's easy. When Jesus talked about being betrayed and arrested and dying, I was angry and protective. I'll fight for you, Lord. I said, I'll die for you. I thought he was just frightened and emotional when he replied, No, Peter. Before the rooster crows 3 times, you will deny knowing me. Deny him? I wouldn't have thought it possible. But that was then. Now I know it's true. When it finally came down to it, I couldn't fight for him. I couldn't die for him. I couldn't even answer the question. I didn't say, yes, I know him, I follow him, I believe in him. I caved to what the ruling powers wanted, to pretend he didn't exist. No, I do not know the man, I said 3 times. And as they led him away, he looked at me. Those eyes. I expected anger and judgment. But there was only love. In his eyes, there was only ever love.
People were curious about my devotion to Jesus, but it's easy to understand, really. I lived with accusations all my life. Mad woman, evil, possessed. They said it all, and more. And much of it was true. But Jesus, he didn't accuse. He didn't judge. He didn't make demands. First, he saw past the pain and brokenness to my soul. It was the first time anyone had ever done that. And it gave me the freedom I longed for. Of course I was devoted. Ironic, then, that the one who accepted and included all without accusation should be forced to hear lies about himself, should stand alone and face all those pointed fingers. The one whose only crime was acceptance, sentenced to death on the force of false accusations. Accusations made by people so threatened by love and healing that was so freely given to them.
Somehow, I've developed a reputation for doubting and questioning, a little unfairly, I think. But I do confess to being confused and uncertain, especially at the end. I mean, he healed the sick. He raised the dead. The whole nation was eating out of the palm of his hand. Then suddenly, they were shouting, "Crucify him!" Why were we all so threatened by healing and love and humility and faithfulness? With all of his power, he just stood there. And then when the soldiers mocked him, he took it all. They stripped his body, torn from the terrible flogging, and pretended to worship him as a king with a crown of hard Judean thorns. They hit him, spat on him, and pulled his hair and beard. How was I to understand this? He could have snuffed them all out in a heartbeat. But he didn't. He just let them mock him, looking at them with God-filled eyes.
Should I have known that moment would come? There had been death threats since he was a baby, and he'd spoken about his death more than once. Maybe I should have seen it, but nothing can prepare a mother to watch her child die. I don't know how I got through that day. My son, sentenced to crucifixion, the slowest, most agonizing death. The death reserved for the criminals who are never to be spoken of again. They are so low. Executed with bandits. My son, who had done nothing wrong. And in the face of it all, he forgave them. Forgave all of us. For silence, complicity, fear, shame. All forgiven. We could not speak in the face of such horror. But even then, he spoke love and truth to the powers of the world, forgiving. Then he cried out, "It is finished." And as I watched that last breath leave his body, it was like me dying up there.
We were unprepared for Jesus' death, and we were even less prepared for what would follow. But let's just say, we have a story to tell.
Truly, this man is the Son of God.